Imagine this. There was a time when the Vatican was bigger than modern-day Belgium. Yep, you heard that right. A religious state that controlled nearly 16,000 square miles of land. But today? The Vatican is just a tiny piece of land smaller than Disneyland. Only 0.2 square miles. Chart decreasing, just think about it. In less than 100 years, the Vatican lost 99.999% of its territory. So, how is that even possible? What happened that turned a massive religious empire into a country the size of a garden? But before we dive into the Vatican's dramatic collapse, we need to understand what the Vatican actually is. It's a tiny city-state right in the heart of Rome, Italy's capital. It's the headquarters of the Catholic Church, the home of the Pope, and the beating heart of the Christian world. Busts in silhouette its population? Only around 800 people. But believe it or not, this miniature country has its own postal service, its own currency, and even its own government. Everything's small, except its influence. Now let's rewind, way back, to the 5th century AD. When the mighty Roman Empire fell, a lot was lost, but not the Church. In those dark times, the Church preserved ancient texts, kept literacy alive, and became a shining light in Europe's darkest nights. Even kings came to kiss the Pope's hand just to earn legitimacy. Over time, the Pope's power wasn't just spiritual. He crowned kings, mediated between kingdoms, and played a central role in European politics. The Church was starting to look more like a shadow government. And now, we reach a turning point, the 8th century. A Frankish king named Pepin the Short gave the Pope a huge gift, a big chunk of Italy. And that was the birth of the Papal States. From that moment on, the Pope wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was a real monarch. From the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, popes were conquering land, one city at a time, from Rome to Bologna and Ravenna. They led armies, collected taxes, and ruled territories. The Vatican was no longer just a church, it had become an empire. Alright folks, let me tell you something, the Papal States, yes, the lands ruled by the Pope, had a fully professional administrative system. Just like a real principality. They maintained roads, managed cities, and signed treaties. The Pope? He wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was basically a head of state. Globe showing Europe, Africa at their peak, the Papal States covered nearly 16,000 square miles, that's about the size of an entire US state. And that was just the beginning. The Vatican's power wasn't limited to Italy. Nope. Through the Crusades, political alliances, and religious influence, the Vatican became a global superpower, kings bowed before it. When the Age of Exploration kicked off, the Pope even played referee of the New World, literally dividing the globe between Spain and Portugal, like a boss saying, "This is yours, and that's mine." Latin Cross Catholicism wasn't just a religion, it was a global force, with the Vatican right at its center. Seminaries, ambassadors, and cultural and political influence stretched from Manila to Madrid. Even in non-Catholic regions, people either respected it or treaded very carefully. But hey, with great power, comes some serious shadows. By the 1500s, people were starting to get suspicious of the Church. The biggest scandal? Selling indulgences, yup. People could literally pay to reduce their time in purgatory. Many saw it as a total scam. Collision, and then came the explosion. A German monk named Martin Luther nailed his list of 95 theses to a church door, and boom! The whole system shook. That was the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Chart decreasing, not only did the church lose followers, it lost land and wealth too. Many Protestant-aligned rulers seized church property, got richer, and weakened Vatican influence big time. brain. That's when the Vatican realized the old world was changing fast, and it had to adapt. Alright folks, sit tight because you're about to hear the real story of the fall of the Church as Sultan and the conquest of Rome. Back when the Church was the undisputed ruler of Europe, one day a series of events started that completely shook everything up. Unity of Christendom? Poof! Like a popped balloon. The Vatican, which thought it controlled everything, suddenly realized it was no longer the main voice, just one noisy voice among many in Europe's religious marketplace. Now, let's get to the heart of the story, the 18th and 19th centuries, the age of enlightenment and revolutions. Here, the Church had to sit down and think, wait, what's this religious freedom thing? Why don't people just do whatever we say anymore? Kings started looking at the Church like a rival sharpening its teeth every day. During the French Revolution? Oh man, things got really ugly. The Church was like a soccer player sent off the field, losing lands, priests either fleeing or, well, lining up for the guillotine. Gone was the untouchable, holy Church. Everyone realized you could fight it, and even beat it. But now for the best part, the unification of Italy. Imagine our own country made up of tiny provinces that don't want to be friends and keep fighting all the time. Italy was just like that, a fragmented land, with each part under foreign influence. Then came national heroes like Garibaldi and Cavour who said, guys, we need to put this puzzle together and make one Italy. But there was one big obstacle, the Papal States. The Pope lived there, wearing fancy robes and heavy crowns, and he didn't want to give up his country. So what happened? In 1859, parts of the Pope's territory went to the Kingdom of Sardinia. In 1860, more areas fell and were added to the kingdom. By 1861, Italy was finally declared a nation, but Rome was still in the Pope's hands, like an apple in the middle of a cake that wouldn't let the cake be whole. In 1870, France, which had been protecting Rome until then, had to withdraw its troops during the Franco-Prussian War. Italy, seeing its chance, quickly sent its forces toward Rome. And guess what? Almost without a fight or trouble, they broke through the gates and entered the city. The Pope was left with a tiny territory, no longer holding that immense power and prestige. That's how Rome fell and the Papal States became history. The Pope became just a religious leader without a state, no land, no army. Just prayers and letter writing left for him. So, guys, how did the mighty Papal States, once roaming Italy like worldly sultans, shrink down to just a garden and a few small buildings? Well, Pope Pius IX wasn't feeling great about it. When Rome fell into Italian hands, he said to himself, no way, I'm not accepting this, and decided to lock himself inside the Vatican walls. Right then and there, he declared, I am a prisoner of the Vatican. And the Italian government? They didn't recognize him at all. Now the Pope was alone, but not really. 3 popes after him followed the same routine, none of them willing to leave the Vatican or make peace with Italy. For a solid 60 years, it was like a political timeout, an isolation and strike of sorts. The Italians couldn't force the issue because it would have been bad for their own image. It was basically a Cold War between the popes and Italy, no bombs, just walls and silence. Then came 1929, when Mussolini, the fascist leader, sat down with the Pope and said, okay, let's make a deal, you get to do your thing, but only on these 110 hectares of land. That's when the great Papal Empire became the smallest country in the world, our very own Vatican City. 99.999% of the Pope's territory vanished, but at least there was a small, independent, respected country left. Today, the Vatican is a religious and cultural giant with no army, no big lands, but its influence still stretches worldwide. Billions of Catholics listen to the Pope's words every day and follow his guidance. And for art and history lovers, the Vatican is a treasure trove of priceless masterpieces. So, From a vast empire to a tiny country inside Italy, but with influence that never faded. Hope you enjoyed this cool historical journey. Don't forget to watch the next videos because even stranger and more fascinating stories await you.